All right, friends, friends and foes, friends and foes update. Just a little wordplay for you, related to Monster Train. We have the final rare draft tier list, and really the final draft tier list here. Started on Hellhorn, now we're here. We're right back here at Hellhorn. Good note to finish on. I will say, as all of their tiers, just a good pool. Pretty good pool. Very, very high rolls here, very solid cards, only a few bad ones, and even though I did settle on giving a few of these, or I don't know if few is the right word, but we'll just say some, the D tier rating, I don't think they're necessarily deserving of the D tier. I would say they are the strongest D tier cards out of any of these clans, and probably the most takeable D tiers. So I put them there though, just because, I don't know, I felt like putting them there. So sue me. But let's get into it here. We have the Alloy of the Ancients. Not necessarily that high rolly of a card, not the biggest ceiling, but just a pretty damn good floor. I'm giving it A tier, kind of the bottom of A tier. It's just a really solid defensive card. You know, 1 Ember, 25. The only real downside here is that it consumes, but that's workable. You know, it's pretty nice with Wormkin consumer return mechanics. And you could always consume return it if you wanted to, but I rarely consume remove this one. I think it's just a nice low investment card. Technically has a good double stack, but I just never double stack it. You can make it 50 armor with a double stack, but typically I would just add it. It's a nice, I think actually probably Intrinsic is my favorite upgrade for it. This is a great one to just make Tethys survive, make Primordium survive, make any squishy backliner survive turn 1 or whatever turn. And that's kind of the use of it. I'm not always really using this on a frontliner necessarily, but it's not out of the question that I do. I guess there is a high roll for it, which would be Apex Imp. With Apex Imp, it's 25 rage. Probably worth double stacking at that point, but yeah, I mean, Apex Imp is going to wreck face anyway, but yeah, I could see Consume removing it, double stacking it for Apex Imp for show. But yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about the card. It's honestly kind of a boring card, right? It's just a bunch of armor and you blast it on a unit and at a very efficient Ember cost. It's just really good. And then we have a Dark Deal. Here's a card that kind of fell for me in the DLC, but not enough that it's not still A tier. It's still a great example of why I hold to that I still think Hellhorn's the best clan in the game. It's definitely my favorite clan in the game, but even though it's not my highest win rate clan in the game, this is maybe an excuse that I'm making for it, but I kind of think it's true. I think I'm so cocky with the clan that it's resulted in some really stupid losses. Like, if I was really playing intelligently, I should just never lose with Hellhorn. I fully believe that Hellhorn, I mean, we're not even talking about Dark Deal at this point, but I might as well just finish this tangent. Like, I feel like Hellhorn's the only clan that is just so fully contained within itself that I'm never looking that hard to the other clans for answers. When I'm Hellhorn, I'm like, alright, Hellhorn will solve the entire run by itself, potentially, right? True, on top of that, though, they just synergize with every single clan in the game very well. There's not a clan in this game they don't synergize with. The only clan I can say that confidently with, too, by the way. But, you know, Dark Deal, you know, circling back to what I guess got me on that tangent, that Dark Deal is just another great example that every single tier of Hellhorn provides scaling. And Dark Deal is great scaling. You know, 14 damage minimum for 0 Ember. Ridiculously efficient. True, the 5 damage does kind of suck. And I will say, prior to the DLC, that 5 damage was not that much of a downside when playing it on your own units, but now that you got to deal with a lot of spikes and sweepers, sometimes that can be iffy, that 5 damage. And moreover, I think probably a bigger thing here is 5 damage pre-DLC killed every backliner in the game if you wanted to play it on an enemy other than Purifier. Now it don't kill jack fuck all, right? It doesn't even kill the shard channelers, and I will never add spell damage to this to make it an offensive card, right? That's just wild to me. I guess you could, but it's basically lost all of its value as a thing that can kill enemies. I mean, by the point you get this, which is typically ring 3 and beyond, even the Quill Hunters sharded up are not going to die to this, right? They got 10 health. So, yeah, it's mainly just a good scaling card purely now. Still a good holdover target, still a good double stack target, still a card that needs no upgrades to be good. It's just a great card. It's a great rage giving card. Cool card art too, I might add. Cool card art. But yeah, not much more to say about Dark Deal. It's just a really good card. Now Impelate, here's a card that I can't give it a good evaluation. I just can't, because it's so... It's technically situational, right? Like, if you're not running Queen Zimplings, it probably doesn't make sense. Though I will say, arguably, if you have enough imps and you have maybe an imp sickle, or what do you call it? If you have a significant amount of imp in a boxes / replayable imp in a boxes, it can still be worth it in a deck. But typically, the main determining factor is, do you have Queen Zimplings or not? If you do, it's going to do over 100 damage for 1 Ember. That's ridiculously nice. If not, maybe not so good. But I look at my take rate. I wanted to put this in the A tier, potentially even S, but I look at my take rate and it's actually really low. So I settled for B, even though it feels icky putting it that low, because it is so powerful. But it just, here's the problem. It's kind of a first world problem. It's a happenstance problem. Hellhorn's just too good and doesn't need this card most of the time. They just don't need another little bit of damage up front because they just have better stuff. Everything else is too OP, and I'd rather just draw into that. I'd rather draw into my Ritual or my Fledgling Imp or my Transcend Imp, even my Dark Deals like Last Stand. You know, spoiler alert, that's going to be a pretty highly rated card. Anything. Just like I'd rather redraw into my amazing scaling cards, or just even like an Inferno or something, better removal, right? So, God, you sure would be loved to have, in a lot of these other clan combos, a 1-cost 100+ damage card, wouldn't you? But you just don't end up needing it in Hellhorn because Hellhorn is so damn overpowered. So it's B by happenstance. Maybe it's a little hypocritical that I rated Hallowed Halls S for similar, like ignoring similar reasons, but I don't know. I don't think Impelate can carry a run quite like a Hallowed Halls can, so I'm fine leaving it in B. It does, for the record, suck on a lot of runs anyway, like when you're running torches and just don't have enough imps, so it is not an always take, and I think it could be an always take with Queen Zimpling technically, but it just often doesn't get taken. There's too many good options at rare, usually, that I can take over it. Speaking of that, Last Stand. I would say this is definitely a card that I didn't really take that much prior to the DLC. It seemed like a pretty win more card pre-DLC. You didn't need that much rage pre-DLC to win, and this was just kind of a dead weight that either made you win more or just made you not draw what you would have rather had. But in the Divinity world, you can never have enough rage, my friend. I mean, you know, if you don't have enough rage, you're just going to be a rat in a cage. So Last Stand is S tier now. This card gets picked a lot for me, and it wins a lot. It is such a fun card too. Like, style points. This is a slam dunk right here. You want to feel like Michael Jordan. You want to feel like the Michael Jordan of Monster Train. You want to dunk from that free throw line. Boom, Last Stand. Get that flying kill, baby. So many flying kills due to Last Stand. It's great. You know what's great? Sometimes you just don't find defense, right? You know what's better than defense? I don't know if you've been schooled in the arts of Cobra Kai, but the best defense is more offense. It's true. It's a very true statement, and Last Stand is evidence of that. Who needs to sustain when you can just end Divinity on wave 3, you know? Last Stand is just, it's good. What can I say? It doubles your rage to the entire floor, and now in the, plus, not only is it more useful, just needing that effect in the Divine World, you also have additional ways to make it easier to play, because you have a -2 upgrade. And you have a spell chain. Honestly, sometimes you can get decks where spell chaining this makes sense, and it's ridiculous then. You quadruple your rage on your floor. Definitely flying kill territory at that point. Now, next card on my list, I think people are going to really disagree with me on this, but I'm going to hold to it. I think it's A tier and borderline S tier, One-Horned Tome. Yes, it's overcosted. Yes, the fragile effect is a huge downside, but I don't know. It's multi-strike. Multi-strike can never be bad. It's a very powerful effect, and yeah, you got to pay a lot here, but you know, in the Divine World, multi-strike is a little bit more needed in a lot of cases. I think with a lot of the updates they've made with, say, like Steelworker, for example, giving armor to the whole floor, I think One-Horned Tome makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases. Plus, infusions of units make it pretty playable too. Like, you can put a Horn Warrior into a Rail Beater, or just have a Rail Beater, right? Rail Beater is probably one of the best benefactors of One-Horned Tome, and Rail Beater is my most chosen Hellhorned banner. So, just a quick shout out. If you don't take Rail Beater, you're fucking up. That unit is busted. You got to start taking that unit. You're not doing Hellhorn right if you're not taking Rail Beater a large portion of the time. But yeah, One-Horned Tome, in the context of a Rail Beater that hasn't added any initial health, the only downside there is that you lost 10 health. So 10 health is a pretty low price to pay for multi-strike, right? And now you have a frickin' unit that has a melee weakness able to get multi-strike applied to it. It's also a great, if you can afford it, you can. It's a great double stack target. But there's shenanigans you have to do at that point. You either need a -2 upgrade at the Divine Temple, and obviously an extra Ember because it still costs 4 at that point. But Pyre Chomper is a good candidate there, or like a Hell's Banners or something, or the Unbroken Horn. There's a lot of ways to get a lot of Ember in Hellhorned. Keep that in mind. But even if you can't do that, you're always guaranteed for 100 gold to get this thing down to 3 cost. And 3 cost, you can play it, and it'll be decent. I think it's a lot more takeable than people give it credit for. I've had some people I've seen on various Discords, people say that's like one of the worst cards in the game, and you're just wrong on that. Like I'm telling you, you'll see my take rate and my win rate with it. It is a good card, and if you haven't been figuring out how to use it, that's kind of on you, right? Like I have proof here that it's a good card, and well, not proof, right? Like I said, I never have 100% proof of anything, but I got evidence here. I have evidence that it's a pretty good card. We'll see later, and honestly, like I said, I debated putting it in S, but I do think that the steep Ember cost and the downside of fragile keep it out of S probably, but it is pretty damn solid most of the time and very high rolly. It can definitely win you runs on its own. And another potential high roll card here, Reinforce, but unfortunately for you, Reinforce, you are no Last Stand, and you're in my D tier. But like I said, the cards I'm putting in my D tier, they're not that bad. I could argue C tier for Reinforce, but I just hardly ever take it. I hardly have any reason ever to take this. But there are runs where it is actually the card you need, right? Those are rough runs, though. I find those are runs that they ain't going well. Let's put it that way. I think it's a very win more card in a lot of scenarios. If you have enough armor that this thing actually gets you a good amount of armor, you probably didn't need it anyway, but The times it would make sense, I guess, would be because you're going to survive waves anyway if you put on enough armor that this makes sense. Generally speaking, it would probably be a relentless solution, and in that case, since this is the clan of just crazy rage scaling, you somehow didn't find good scaling offensively if you needed this, right? And that's already a problem because you're probably leaking a fuckload. But you know, all those things said, it's in a vacuum, it's valuable, right? I wish it applied to the entire floor like Last Stand does. It'd probably be a little more usable for me in that case. Probably not S tier, but I could theorize maybe B tier if it just costed the same, still consumed, but just went to the whole floor. It is kind of funny though, because like as we've noted, offense is better than defense anyway, and the fact that Last Stand, if they were both single target cards, Last Stand would still be way better. But it is funny that Last Stand goes to the whole floor while Reinforced doesn't. That's kind of backwards in my opinion. Then we got 2 cards left here. One of them's going to be S and one of them's going to be D. Think real hard on what those might be. Make your guesses. I think I'm going to surprise you. Nah, who am I fooling? Who am I fooling? Spike of the Hellhorn is D. But again, I think Spike the Hellhorn, it's impressed me here and there. I debated putting it in the C, but I didn't really want to, you know, if there's newer players watching this, I don't want to lead them down taking Spike of the Hellhorn a lot. Like, it's one of those cards that's kind of like, I can find situations where it's pretty good, but really it should not be a go-to, and I don't want to make... one of my biggest things... I find I'm like one of the only people that actually like Hellhorn the best out of all clans, so like, I don't want to steer people in the wrong direction thinking Spike of the Hellhorn ain't horrible, right? Like, it's horrible, but it is technically, in some cases, when you can generate a gigantic number of Ember, it technically can benefit there, especially if it's double stacked. I've had it be an Echo Right return with Kindle before, and that was pretty good. I've had it work with one Unbroken Horn. Can be pretty good in that scenario. Can work with Pyre Chomper decently, but at a base line, just as a card, it's bad. Like, you're getting a horrible return. It's even worse than Inflame if you factor in that of the vanilla cost of 2. If it was both cards were vanilla and I spent 2 Ember, I technically get more value out of Inflame. That should tell you something about how bad Spike of the Hellhorn technically is. So, I don't know. I don't want to really talk too much about Spike. I do think it's quite usable, though, in a lot of scenarios, but I'm not going to lead anyone down thinking it's actually a good card, because it's not. I think it's more takeable than Reinforce, though. I think sometimes you can low roll and Spike can actually be what you needed to make that run start working for you. It's not too bad on Superfood Primordium. But then we got Transcendent. Now, there's no denying it's S tier, right? But do you think I'm going to put it ahead or behind Last Stand? Make your guesses. Behind. I bet you didn't guess that. I didn't. I would have... First thing when I looked at this, I was like, yeah, Transcendent, it's the top of S, nothing beats it. Then I looked at my data. Last Stand actually has a good edge on Transcendent in take rate. And that's kind of why I'm putting Transcendent a little bit below it. And when I think about it, there are enough runs where it just doesn't make sense to add Transcendent. Whereas compared to Last Stand, I can't think of too many runs where Last Stand doesn't make sense to add. It's almost an always take with Hellhorn. Now, true, there are times when Transcendent is better than Last Stand, aka roughly 50% of the time, since you'll have Queen's Imp. Queen's Imp is, by the way, the best infusion into Transcendent if you're going to find Endless on Transcendent. If you don't find Endless, I wouldn't do the Queen's Imp one, obviously. It's still... Nice thing about Transcendent, though, is, like, obviously the highest roll here is the Queen's Imp with Endless. That single-handedly wins the game on its own, as long as you can Helven it once at least. It likes to have support from things like Important Work, or just ways to make the Ember a little bit easier. But in a general sense, having 2 of them endless with a Queen's Imp infusion is enough to solo any variant of Seraph and just Divinity. Like, that's enough, literally, just those 2. It's enough to solo the whole game. As long as you're not... you gotta let them die, though. There is a certain point where they start clearing waves. That's not a problem on Divinity. It's not a problem with Patient, but it is a problem with the other variants of Seraph. You do need to be mindful of that, so just make sure you have some way to kill it, right? Shouldn't be hard with the plethora of options available with Hellhorn, but the only way you can fuck it up is if you don't let the thing die. But all that being said, there's still great... Like, you can put anything into Transcendent and it will be great. Like, if you didn't start with Queen's Imps, it's still fine to just have it as a unit. Self-infuse isn't bad either. Like, if I already had, a Fledgling Imp on Endless and I found this Transcendent pretty late, I can just Hellvent it at the final Hellvent to make it Endless, if I didn't find the actual Endless upgrade at a Merchant of Steel, right? And at that point, it's still pretty fine. You play your Fledgling Imp a few times, and then this thing will be like however many Fledgling Imps you already played, and it's on Endless. So there's really no low roll situation for Transcendent outside of just not having Imps, right? Like, I would say this: if you don't have Queen's Imps and you didn't find Fledgling Imp, or maybe to a lesser extent Welder Helper, but really Fledgling Imp, if you didn't find them, that's when I start to probably skip Transcendent. You might be able to make it work with if you have a Imp Sickle or an Imp in a Box. It still might be worth adding in that case, but in a general sense, if you don't have Queen's Imp, if you don't have Fledgling Imp, I would probably think twice about adding Transcendent. It might not be that good at that point. There is also one other thing. If you have a Molting Imp, that works too. It's not as good as the Queen's Imp infusion, but you can basically solo with Molting Imp as well. You may need a little bit of extra help, though. You might need, definitely an important work, or maybe 3 of those Transcendents if you want to solo the game. But keep in mind, soloing the game's just Flash, right? Like, you don't have to solo the game with them. You can just have them take care of most of the game and still have your banners finish things off, right? Finish off Relentless or whatnot. But yeah, can't really say much bad about Transcendent. It's pretty damn god tier. Sometimes the 2 cost, they nerfed it from 1 to 2 cost. Well deserved, by the way. Sometimes you might need some help there. Usually just playing a single Pyre Chomper is a great way to fix that. Or finding something like Hell's Banners or important work. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and upgrade your Ember too. Sometimes that happens. Just be thinking about it. Be thinking about ways you can mitigate that downside. Because like I said, you're going to need 2 of them on Endless if you want them to solo the game. And obviously, at a baseline, you'll need 4 Ember for that. But usually, 90% of the time, I don't need an Ember upgrade to handle that. Like, usually I can figure out something better there. And that's the Hellhorned rare tier. I will say everything from B tier onto S could probably fit the S of most other clans, honestly. Like, they're so good. I mean, imagine having Dark Deal in Awoken. All those runs where you didn't fucking find Razor Sharp Edge now have a 40% chance to just find Dark Deal. Ooh, that would be amazing. My god, would I love that. So definitely S tier for a lot of these other clans, but because Hellhorned is just so great, it falls into the A tier here. So yeah, no secret, Hellhorned is my favorite clan. I do still kind of think they're the best clan in the game. When I look at the tier lists and whatnot, they're very similar to Melting in that everything is good, right? But I think they're even better. Like, I would say that their artifact spread is better. I would say that maybe their common tier the spread isn't quite as good as Melting's, but I do think the high rolls are better. I think the uncommon tier is comparable between the two, and I think the rare tier definitely Hellhorn wins out compared to Melting Remnant. But we also have that other intangible thing that we talked about with Melting, where the Drag's secondary severely suffers when it can't find a few key mechanics, whereas I don't think Hellhorned has that problem, right? I think there's so many things you can find. Because keep in mind, I have had runs with Hellhorn where I somehow don't find rage, but I still have other ways to scale, right? Like I've had just a simple Alpha Fiend infusion into anything is a way to scale, right? So for those reasons, I think Hellhorn's the best clan, but it's not reflected in my data, I will say that. So I'm not like 100% positive on it, but they certainly feel the best to me, and they're the most fun for me to play. Now let's take a final quick look at the data here for Hellhorn. So we see a lot of the cards we've talked about prior, like Tiresome Climb. These are gigantic take rates, by the way. 59 and 3, 55 and 5, 50 and 4, but we're not really talking about those cards right now. We're talking about the rares. Look at Last Stand there, 36 and 3. That is one of my most taken cards. I believe it's third most taken rare for me, because first was Awoken at like 50 or 60, and then the Awoken Rail Spike or whatever. Then it was Umbra at like 40-ish, I think, 30 to 40. And then Last Stand, I think, here is next at 36 and 3. So that just goes to show how takeable it is. Hard to deny also the 36 and 3 win rate there. Just very, very, very potently powerful. What a potent card. That's a good way to describe Last Stand. It is potent. Impotent work. But then, Transcendent, kind of a little bit further down than I thought it would be, but it makes sense, because like I said, there's a good chunk of runs where it doesn't make sense to add Transcendent. And it's always sad when that happens, right? You're like, oh, Transcendent, I could have had you on a different run and it would have been so nice, but there are those runs, right? I don't know how I've lost 3 times at Transcendent. I'm about to check the replay tape on that. But yeah, I guess 27 to 3 for Transcendent. Definitely still S tier though, right? That's in my S tier wheelhouse. And then Alloy is not far behind, but I still think it's A tier, because like I said, I don't think it has quite these high rolls that Transcendent and Last Stand have, where they literally win runs on their own. It's pretty rare that an Alloy would win a run on its own, right? But for the record, pretty damn takeable. I think it goes under the radar for how good it is. 22 and 1, hard to deny that, right? And then we go down One-Horned Tome. Like I said, it's a lot more takeable than people give it credit for. 19 and 2. How can you deny that? 19 and 2. And like I said, it's never 100% proof positive, right? There's always variance and whatnot. Who knows what the context was when I take these cards? Like I will say, sometimes I take One-Horned Tome and it doesn't actually do much for me on a run. I'll admit to that, but I don't know. It's hard to convince me that it's not a good thing to just have multi-strike, even if the cost is high, even if there's a downside associated. I think that downside is, in a clan with so much access to armor, pretty mitigatable, and in a game where you can so easily reduce the ember cost of spells, it's more playable than you give it credit for. So I think it's A tier, borderline S. Like I said, I stick to that. And then Dark Deal, a little bit down there, but still 15 and 3 seems A tier to me. And like I said, it's just nice to have this option, right? It's nice to know that at all tiers I can find rage, right? All tiers I can find offensive scaling. Just a nice thing that Dark Deal provides here. And then next rare was great deal further down here, Impalate. And this was the one that surprised me, right? Like in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, I've taken Impalate a lot. It's so good. It's such a takeable card, right? But it's only 6 and 0. I mean, it's winning, right? Like I said, it's probably one I could take more, but I just don't. So the fact that I don't take it much, really hard to give it much more than a B tier. I do think you could consider it win more in essence, because like I said, often you just don't need that hit. Other clans would probably love this card. I mean, they wouldn't love it in the sense that you need imps for it to be good, but let's say that change imps for some other condition. Just say 50% of the time the card can do 100 damage for one ember to the front line. Every other clan in the game would love that. Every other clan would. Can't convince me otherwise. But yeah, in Hellhorned, who are just so OP, they just don't need it. And then Spike, actually, I took more than Impalate, technically. 6 and 1. So 7 takes versus 6 takes. But, and like I said, it might be C tier. I might not be giving Spike a fair shake by putting it in D tier, but I don't know, just efficiency-wise, it's pretty shitty. Even if there are situations where you can use that shitty efficiency to great effect. You could convince me that it's C tier, though. Probably not B tier. Then reinforce the final one at 4 and 1 there. But like I said, if you compare the Hellhorn D tiers to the other D tiers, like most of the other D tiers were like a lot of times just 1 or 2 picks or no picks at all, right? So we're still getting 5 to 7 picks here on our D tier. Like I said, I think this is the most powerful D tier that exists on my tier lists. It probably would be the C tier for most other clans. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot good to say about Reinforce necessarily. It's pretty win more, I think, and every now and then it might be what you needed to win, but usually not. It should probably be buffed, but honestly, Last Stand should probably be nerfed. They should flip them, in my opinion. Reinforce, that should go to the whole floor. Last Stand should go to a single unit. That would even it out a bit. But anyway, that is the conclusion of our rare drafts and really all the drafts, right? So let me know what your thoughts are. If you have any ideas for another tier list, let me know. Nothing really comes to mind right now, unless we want to, do that other thing we were talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Jeff knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, yeah. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was useful. What more to say? Until next time. I'm kind of sad that these are done now. Maybe I'll just redo them all again in a month. How about that? Let's do that. See if they change. Maybe in like 6 months. I bet they'll change a bit. That's the thing I love about this game, man. Like, everything. My views on literally everything have changed so many times over the course of me playing this game. My favorite clans have changed several times. My most hated clans have changed several times. For the majority, pre-DLC, Hellhorn was my most hated clan, by the way. Easily, by a good long shot. And Melting was my favorite clan for most of pre-DLC. Probably them, Stygian, and Awoken. Post-DLC, it's been Hellhorn for most of it, but I've shifted several times to I think the best clan is. Like, it's gone from Awoken to Hellhorn to Stygian to Melting. It's never been Umbra, it's never been Melting, I can tell you that much. Those are usually floating for the worst, but I also go back and forth there a lot. I'm still not 100% sure on who the worst is, or the best. But I will give a best to Hellhorn currently. They certainly feel the best to me. And with that, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. Any surprises? Any disagreements? Any agreements? Hey, maybe you just want to know let me know what you did on a slow Tuesday. I think this is coming out Wednesday, but yeah, let me know what you did on a slow Tuesday. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching. This is Gabriel signing out. Until next time, peace.